the structure of the chapters, pardon me, it's been a long day, um, that we can use to organize the conversation tonight. And I don't know how many of you have read the book or not, but here's a one-page statement. I'm not going to read it to you about why I did this, which I think you heard a little bit about already from me. I will say that in my field, in architecture, and with a degree program that we've launched in urban technology, which is the first of its kind at the undergraduate level in America, I would get asked every week, so what do you think of the smart city? That's why it's coming from that. I can say a bit more about that. Where it came from, I essentially triangulated between three things. I was able to obtain a month-long residence at America's National Energy Lab, Lawrence Berkeley Labs, because of a former colleague from fancy Harvard University, where I got to be in the 90s, who was there and who was a member of California's Public Utility Commission. I did a bunch of expert interviews, and I had time, which only a late career academic could have, to mine all kinds of very disparate sources, some of which you see listed there. And this would have been in the late teens, the first time we had the orange monster come onto the set, and many of us were looking for a positive story. The first chapter sets the stage that this is in fact happening. Grid edge, Heather, in my country, grid edge is a phrase used by infrastructure builders in the industry for all of the things that are being built out that are too many, too diverse in a two-way or omnidirectional arrangement that cannot be centrally controlled or owned. That's what they mean by grid edge. And the phrase was coined, I think, in 2013, in America, at least the American use of it, by this council, Grid Edge Council. And you can see a bunch of logos there of member companies. And I had certainly been around smart city grid edge events in Detroit, which is the big city where I am. The second chapter is the historic perspective. I happen to come from a family of historians, and I had the encouragement from this eminent historian of energy, David Nye. You could also find I can drop some David Nye in the chat later, or you can find his stuff separately. He had a book on the history of blackouts, for instance. And those of us dealing with urban technology are very fascinated with the analogy between electrification being new and uncanny and embedded in things back then, and computation and sensors and actuators being embedded invisibly in things now. That's a analogy I learned in Silicon Valley in the 90s. There's a chapter on the pluralism, on just the hunch that this field that had been left to policy wonks and civil engineers in the United States, at least, for a long, long time, could no longer quite be so. Because as you know better than I, they deny that there's an opportunity or a problem. So that was my naive outsider's take on the political deadlock there, written in the flavor of these science, technology, society people that I have been around. The microgrid chapter itself is the one I would love to have a do-over on, just because how much I've learned since doing the book. But it essentially is arguing that there need to be social changes and in particular institutions. What the chapter lacked, or what the book lacked, is another chapter of the financial analysis, because the book has no financial analysis, because it's not my field. I am not a policy analyst. A lot of them wouldn't even touch it. Coming from architecture, however, I certainly had arguments about scale, and this is super important to us in our new degree program that we've launched in urban technology. Because remember, this is in the teens, this is a while back, and there was this phase of infatuation with these small glowing rectangles, would everybody just go around and look at these things all day. People know better now, right? And it was forgotten that not everything is an isolated device and a omnipotent cloud with digital overlords in it. There's stuff in between. There's institutions, there's places, there's buildings, there's streets, And that's the field I come from. So that was a pivotal chapter in the book for sure. And through my contacts at Lawrence Berkeley National Labs, I was able to have pretty good conversations about the microgrid nanogrid relationship and about all the stuff that is developing for direct current applications of certain things as building components, which frankly I'm surprised hasn't come faster in the last 10 years. Uh, but some of it has. For instance, light over Ethernet. Uh, yeah, I'm talking to engineers. You know this stuff better than I do. Through our new degree program, we had contact with people in Google Sidewalk Labs in New York, for instance, on all this. I also spend a lot of time hanging around interaction designers, and have for 30 years. And my more credible and if anything I did is ever influential work is in this area at the bridge between the architecture discipline and the interaction design discipline. Uh, and there's this paradox here that it's not all set and forget, that the more sensate and the more variable and programmable that inhabitable systems become, the more you got to coexist with them. You can't just set them and forget them. Uh, so I got to interview a bunch of people doing things in this realm. And we architects push back against the engineers. The engineers think that comfort is a physiological static state that you can engineer, optimize, and that uniformity is always what you want. Nonsense. Comfort is a pursuit. Just watch a cat. They go to where it's warmer, and they would be miserable if everything was exactly the same temperature and humidity and lighting level and so on. And so would I. So, glassed in uniformity is neither enjoyable, nor affordable, nor sustainable, nor healthy, none of that. So then the book caps off at the islands chapter, which, Heather, I think you rightly see, that's really where a lot more of the provocation is. And again, coming at it from urbanism and architecture, where archipelago is an operative concern. For example, in Detroit, which is a Rust Belt city extraordinaire, there's no way that they're going to redo the whole place. That it's the idea of an acupuncture urbanism, that you don't go do a few things to get people thinking about a bigger thing, has been around a while. I was starting to see lots of different scales and institutional setups for district energy, and for neighborhood energy. And in Berkeley, where I was visiting, there's a very famous eco-block project in Oakland, California, the Oakland Eco-Block project from, I guess that's from around 2010, maybe, that came out of the architecture school. So I was just around examples of this stuff. And you know better than I about community energy. And there's just a moment in my field, and this image comes from Jeanette Kim in San Francisco, who was a guest at my book launch, and who was a friend of our dean. The Underdome Guide is a lovely little drawing book about New York City. There's just a moment, right? Because when at the first moment that the Orange Monster came in, we did not know exactly how incompetent they would be, and that it wouldn't all just be dire. This time, however, it's a little more scary, and they're a little more prepared. Who knows? Okay, so in sum, uh, I think it was motivated coming from Smart City, right? And I think that resilience people know this well. I wrote an application to go to the famous um, think tank in Bellagio and Ticino, but of course I'm not world famous and I didn't get it. But they were doing a whole thing about resilience and bouncing forward, not just bouncing back. Anyway, it's generally a critique of always, everywhere, everything. The architects again had to go through this. Back in the 90s, they had this. A lot of people thought, "Oh, it's all going to disappear through the looking glass into cyberspace." Doesn't that word sound so 90s? No, it didn't. And it's very, very clear to resilience strategists or to ecological systems thinkers, and we have them around. They're around. I wish I had more training in that. I'd love to be industrial ecologist, and I knew people who were so from day one. They're on this, right? You can't have everything always everywhere all the time. So what resilience does is it has a little more wobble in it all. It's recombinant, it's intermittent, right? Uh, and this is not a wish to go back before demon electricity, right? No. And it's also not all hippie wonderful everything. The chief electrical engineer in my university, a guy named Ian Hiskins, who I think's from, I don't know if he was Australia or New Zealand, I think he's from that part of the world, could explain this super well, how no, you can't have 100% renewables anytime soon. All right, so what it is just what we're here to talk about tonight. And intermittency, interconnectivity, lateral connections, two-way, no longer all top-down, not centralized. All that stuff that began in the 80s, the decentralization, right? All that Rocky Mountain Institute kind of stuff. Now it could happen. That was the wish for the book. Okay. And in the last thought here. In the science technology society discipline, we're always on the lookout for when lots of fields separately arrive at an insight that they realize is the same insight that a lot of other fields are having. A classic textbook example of that is the expression carbon neutral. There was no such expression until rather recently. And then lots of different fields discovered that, oh, there's a thing called carbon neutral. Just to hope that there could be some kind of uh, uh, discovery of that, an ontological innovation, or however they would, whatever their jargon is for it, right? Around this idea of adaptability and lateral interconnectivity in local energy. It's just a wish. And that comes from Science Technology Society. And I'm on it because we have this degree program in urban technology. All right, so that's my short version because I haven't done long versions in a while because the book vanished into the pandemic. Even the crickets were on lockdown. And also, the book does not have the quantitative analysis, either fiscal or engineering. And I'm an outsider to the field. So I was three strikes and I was out. I'm frankly astonished that anyone is reading it at all, but it's very encouraging that it shows up on the other side of the world a few years later. And, I don't mind. Uh, um, the, I'm convinced that by the people who helped me that the work was sound, and and obviously I do not have an agenda to push. There's no vested interest, and I'm not some crazy green idealist.